Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters, when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. So the first thing you need to know if you're studying this poem is that sonnets are a particular form of poetry which uses a specific structure. All sonnets have 14 lines, but how these lines are organised within the poem depends on whether you're looking at a Shakespearean sonnet or a Petrarchan sonnet. So in a Petrarchan sonnet, the lines are divided into a group of 8 lines, known as the octave, and a group of 6 lines, known as the sestet. Whereas in a Shakespearean sonnet, the 14 lines are divided into 3 groups of 4 lines, which are called quatrains, followed by a pair of lines known as the rhyming couplet. Now, the way in which these lines are grouped is through what we call the poem's rhyme scheme. And the way that you work out a poem's rhyme scheme is by looking at the lines that rhyme together and ascribing them a letter of the alphabet. So if you look at the first line of this poem, we've got the word minds at the end of it. So we're going to call that the A line. And you find then another line which rhymes with that, love, no, so finds rhymes with that, but there's nothing else in the poem which does. So if you look at the second line of the poem then, the word love, we're going to call that the B line. And then we've got this rather awkward sort of sight rhyme between love and remove, which we're going to call the B line as well. Now, the word mark doesn't rhyme with anything which has come before it, so we're going to call that the C line. Wandering bark rhymes with mark, so we will call that the C line as well. And then shaken and taken we will call the D lines. And so you can begin to see how this A, B, C, D rhyme scheme is starting to emerge, and that's how we get these groups of 4 lines. So then we can follow this through the rest of the poem. With cheeks, we're going to call that E, and weeks. And then again, we've got sort of a bit of a half rhyme here between come and doom, which we're going to call F and F. And then proved and loved, which are one of these sight rhymes, which is the rhyming couplet at the end, which we will label GG. Traditionally, sonnets are thematically concerned with love, and in this sonnet we have Shakespeare proudly, almost boastfully at times, proclaiming that he is able to define true love. And we're going to have a look at this poem quatrain by quatrain. So let's have a look at the first line and a half of the first quatrain. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. We're just going to focus here on this word, because the word impediment might remind us of the 1559 Book of Common Prayer, which is used in marriage ceremonies. If either of you do know of any lawful impediment, why ye might not be joined together in matrimony, let ye confess it now. And an impediment is a barrier or an obstruction, and Shakespeare is saying here that if 2 people truly love each other, then there should be no barrier between them. And this is Shakespeare's opening statement, like a lawyer building a case. And he separates this from his first main argument using a caesura, which is here, which is a piece of punctuation within a line of poetry. He then makes his first observation about true love. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. And Shakespeare is almost bluntly asserting here that if your love for another person changes or alters when it finds change in the other person, then it was never true love in the first place. This same assertion is developed when he completes the quatrain with or bends with the remover to remove. In other words, true love will not change or bend, perhaps the way that appearances will. In the second quatrain, Shakespeare uses a metaphor. And this is the metaphor of a storm or tempest, which perhaps might be used to represent the rows or troubles or difficulties which any relationship might face. He says that true love is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. And through this comparison, he adds another assertion to his argument that true love will look on these troubles and be unmoved, untroubled, and solid. He then employs a fairly commonplace nautical image here of a wandering ship being guided by the stars. But the significance of this image, or its worth, can be understood by having a think about the poem's context. This was a time before the ability to measure longitude at sea, which wasn't a problem that was solved by mariners until 1773. And so Shakespeare is saying something about the essential qualities of true love as a guiding force. The third quatrain is perhaps the most complex in terms of imagery, and it begins with this line, "Love's not time's fool," which personifies the two concepts of love and time. And in Shakespearean England, a fool would have been a clown used by the nobility for perhaps brief diversion or entertainment. And so the line can be interpreted as meaning that true love is not simply a brief, light-hearted distraction. Shakespeare continues this metaphor by conceding that time does have some power over love. Rosy lips and cheeks, these aspects of female beauty, are subject to the bending sickle of time and so ultimately will fade. But he completes this quatrain by ultimately dismissing the power of time as brief. It's brief compared to true love, which will survive, Shakespeare says, until the end of the world, the edge of doom. And in the couplet at the end of this sonnet, Shakespeare is concluding his argument. He is summing up by stating that if this definition, which he has set out in the previous 12 lines of the poem, if this definition is wrong, then he never wrote anything, and no man has ever been in love. Two incontrovertible truths which serve as a challenge to anyone wishing to contradict him.